In part one, we slowed down enough to see the problem clearly. We talked about why modern work feels heavier than it should, why doing more often creates more friction, and why clarity doesn't come from discipline or hustle, it comes from alignment. Part two is where we begin building something different. This part of the audiobook is called The System, not because Digital Kaizen is rigid or mechanical, but because clarity needs somewhere to live, a place for thoughts to land, a way for insights to resurface, a rhythm that you can return to when things get noisy again. The key idea here is simple. Growth isn't linear, it's looped. You don't need a new version of yourself, you need a returning rhythm. When most people hear the word system, they think structure, folders, tags, dashboards, rules to follow. Digital Kaizen flips that. This system isn't about control, it's about listening to your voice, listening to patterns in your work, in your energy, listening to what keeps resurfacing, even when you try to ignore it. In this section, we'll build the loop itself. You'll hear about why voice is the most honest capture tool that you have, how raw data becomes insight without over-organizing, how AI can surface meaning without replacing judgment, why weekly reflection teaches you who you're becoming, and how feedback turns reflection into evolution. This is where Digital Kaizen stops being an idea and starts becoming a practice. How to listen to this part. One important note before you continue, you don't need to implement everything that you hear. Start messy, capture imperfectly, trust the meaning that emerges after contact, not before. This part rewards return more than intensity. The loop doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs you to come back. We'll begin with the front door of the system, your voice. Before judgment, before polish, before the moment disappears. Let's begin part two. Chapter 7. Voice first and capturing what's real before judgment kicks in. Let's begin where most systems don't. Not with the tool stack, not with the productivity method, not with the AI assistant or the CRM or the perfect folder structure. Let's begin with something far more ancient and far more personal. Your voice. Your voice is the start, not the polish. That's where Digital Kaizen begins. Because long before there were apps or frameworks, there was the simple act of saying what you think before the moment passes and the thought disappears. And if you're anything like me, you probably learned the hard way that the most important ideas don't come while you're staring at a blinking cursor. They come while you're walking the dog, driving home, or pacing in your kitchen, moments when your brain finally exhales. Voice capture is how you catch those ideas, before the moment evaporates, before the self-editor kicks in, before the insight slips through the cracks. This chapter is about how to turn your voice into your most powerful thinking tool, and how to protect it from the judgment that usually follows. Origin story, why I talk to myself in parking lots, how it started, and why I never stopped. I've been doing voice-first capture since long before AI could transcribe it. In the early days of my practice, I used a handheld Sony recorder, no app, no transcription, no fancy mic, just me walking through a parking lot talking to myself. Sometimes it was after a client meeting, sometimes it was a podcast idea, sometimes it was a frustration I needed to say out loud before it festered. No script, no tags, just honesty. It wasn't efficient, it wasn't structured, but it worked. When I spoke my thoughts, instead of keeping them locked in my head, I remembered them. I understood them. I could do something with them. What I didn't have back then was research to back me up. Why voice works, the science. Cognitive boosts. Voice-first thinking isn't a gimmick, it's a cognitive upgrade. 1. The production effect. Saying something out loud dramatically increases memory encoding. When you speak, you activate auditory and motor regions in your brain, making your thoughts stickier. 2. Default mode network activation. Voice thinking taps the brain's introspective network, where meaning, creativity, and emotional insight are synthesized. 3. Self-distancing. Saying, "I'm feeling overwhelmed" aloud creates emotional clarity. This verbal processing, known as self-distancing, reduces anxiety and improves decision-making. 4. Verbal sketching. Voice journaling is like scribbling a draft on a napkin. It's fast, flexible, and frees you from pressure to get it right. Emotional benefits. 1. Emotional verbalization calms the brain. Studies show that naming difficult feelings out loud reduces amygdala activity. Saying it literally helps you feel it differently. 2. Self-distancing through voice. Speaking in second or third person, "you're overwhelmed," improves objectivity and self-compassion. 3. Offloading increases fluidity. Verbal journaling reduces cognitive load, leading to more insight with less effort. Capture before critique. The power of the first draft. There's something sacred about the first draft of a thought. It hasn't been polished. It hasn't been filtered for smartness. It hasn't been strangled by perfectionism or edited for social media. It's raw, messy, maybe even cringeworthy, and often closer to the truth. That's the kind of thinking Digital Kaizen is built to protect. When you trust that first voice, the one that speaks before your critic steps in, you access a deeper kind of clarity, not performative, not postured, just honest. Why we edit too soon. We live in a culture that prizes polish. Even our Slack messages feel like they need punchlines. That performance mindset doesn't just shape how we communicate, it shapes how we think. The inner critic shows up fast. "That's dumb. Someone already said this. You should know better." So we filter, we delete, and we lose the thought, not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't ready. Tools for voice first capture. Premise. Voice memos. Use your phone or smartwatch. After a meeting, on a walk, in traffic, prompt. So, what am I afraid to say aloud? What surprised me today? 2. AI recorders, fireflies.ai, Otter Scribe, where capture and transcribe calls, summarize and tag, create searchable insights. 3. Creator tools, Descript, Opus Clip. Edit audio like a doc. Pull out emotion-rich moments. Prompt, find where I sound most uncertain or most passionate. Protect the raw thought from yourself. Voice is a capture tool. Judgment is a review tool. The mistake, swapping their roles. When you lead with voice, you create room for truth. When you lead with judgment, you silence it. You're not building a highlight reel. You're building a relationship with your unfiltered self. Lab loop note. The night the insight slipped out. I had just wrapped a tough call, one of those meetings where the client says something that sticks with you deeper than you expect. It wasn't about numbers, it was about grief, about legacy, about what we leave behind that can't be calculated. Normally I would have let it sit in my chest and moved on, but that night I slipped out the front door, took a walk, and hit record. At first I was just venting, talking out loud so I didn't take the weight home to Heather and Alistair. But somewhere in the middle of that voice note, I said something I'd never quite put into words before. Something real, something useful. I didn't hear it until days later during my weekly loop, but when I did, it stopped me cold. That moment, it became a chapter, a podcast, a turning point in how I explain legacy to clients. And the only reason it still exists is because I said it out loud before I judged it. That's what this whole voice first loop is for. Where this leads, weekly loop or 5-day voice challenge. Choose a rhythm. Record one voice memo per day. Label with an emotion, not topic. Let it sit. Review at the end of the week. Ask, what am I avoiding? What keeps resurfacing? What's clearer now than it was? Voice first captures the front door to pattern recognition. Each time you speak something true, you leave a breadcrumb, and over time, those breadcrumbs become a trail, a map, a mirror. You didn't just record your thoughts, you grew through them, and the more you listen, the more you recognize the voice you've always had. Chapter 8. Data is gold. Capture the raw, let AI refine what counts as data and why it matters. Let's reframe something right away. Data isn't just numbers in a spreadsheet. It's not KPIs, dashboards, or the neat stuff you drop into your CRM. In Digital Kaizen, data is life. It's the laughter that breaks out in a client meeting. It's the catch in your voice when you admit something you hadn't said aloud before. It's your late night worry, your gut instinct, the moment you almost missed. We are not in the information age anymore. We're in the meaning age. And in this new era, what matters most is not just collecting more, but capturing what's real. If you remember one thing from this chapter, let it be this. Don't wait for the perfect system to record what matters. Record what matters so the system can catch up later. This is the central loop of Digital Kaizen. We don't need perfect folders or pristine tags. Thanks to AI, Fireflies.ai, ChatGPT, Notion AI, and more, we can now find gold in the chaos. But only if we captured the ore in the first place, because no matter how good AI becomes, it can't mine what you never stored. How to capture the right stuff without overthinking it. Here's the honest truth. You're not too busy. You're under capturing. It's not that you don't have good ideas, it's that you don't catch them in time. We've trained ourselves to write down what feels important, meeting notes, to-do lists, a cleaned up version of what we really thought. But that's not where the insight lives. Insight shows up when you least expect it. A client says, "I just want to feel safe." You mumble, "Something's off here," after a team call. You wake up at 3:17 a.m. with the breakthrough you were chasing all week. You won't remember it unless you capture it. So how do you make capturing part of the loop? Use whatever tool is easiest. Voice Memos app, Fireflies.ai or Otter, Descript. Even sending WhatsApp notes to yourself. Label loosely. You don't need to be precise. Just tag by feeling. Insight. Overwhelmed, frustrated, grateful. Let it sit. Don't re-listen right away. Let time do some of the distilling. How AI helps you reflect and what that reveals. Here's where it gets powerful. Modern AI doesn't just transcribe, it understands. With tools like Fireflies.ai, I can get meeting summaries, identify action items, tag emotional tone automatically. With ChatGPT and Descript, I can summarize 100 voice memos into one bullet list, pull out patterns and hooks I didn't know I said, turn loose thoughts into insights, newsletters, even strategies. This is intelligent knowledge management, powered by the most human data there is, your voice. But again, only if you store it. You're not building a library, you're building a time machine, and future you will thank present you for keeping the receipts. Loop Lab note. I remember one night just rambling into my phone after a late client meeting. I didn't even plan to capture anything, just venting. 2 weeks later, I was reviewing the transcripts and saw a sentence I didn't even remember saying. That sentence, it became the centerpiece of a webinar that brought in half a dozen ideal clients. Not because I planned it, because I caught it. What if you're not creative? You don't have to be a podcaster, coach, or entrepreneur. Parents can store their kids' one-liner wisdom. Students can summarize class voice notes into flashcards. Therapists can reflect on emotional tone across sessions. Professionals can capture insights mid-project or post-call. Your voice is already data. You just need to press record. A 5-day Digital Kaizen challenge. Start today, even if it's messy. Record one voice memo per day, 30 seconds minimum. Label it by energy, not category. Let it sit. Don't re-listen yet. After 5 days, ask ChatGPT or your AI assistant, what themes came up repeatedly? What surprised you about my tone or topics? What patterns am I missing? Take one small action based on what you learn. That's the Kaizen loop in action. Not perfection, not polish, just progress. Final thought, what you save saves you. One day you'll look back and realize the insight that changed your business was buried in a memo you almost deleted. The breakthrough in your relationship started in a voice note you whispered alone. The story that built your keynote began as a vent on a Tuesday, but only because you stored it. Say it, save it, let it simmer. AI will meet you there. Chapter 9, Organize later, capture first, structure from use. Let's debunk a myth. Organization is not the beginning, it's the reward. Too often we're taught to start with structure. Clean folders, color-coded tags, airtight categories. What you really find is premature organization kills creativity. Digital Kaizen flips that model. We don't lead with structure. We let it emerge. We don't organize for perfection. We organize from pattern. We don't design for an imaginary self. We evolve with the real one. This chapter is about removing friction from your thinking process and letting structure grow from what you actually use. The real problem isn't mess, it's mistiming. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of us don't struggle with disorder. We struggle with the fear of disorder. That's what drives the urge to over-organize, the blank Notion template, the folder hierarchy you never stick to, the endless retagging loop. We think if we can just structure things first, we'll avoid the mess. But the mess is where the meaning lives. Trying to organize before you've captured real experience is like trying to alphabetize a library before the books are written. Structure built too early is all polish, no pulse. Capture first, always. The most valuable systems don't start with categories, they start with chaos. When you're in a moment of insight, capture it. When you feel something, record it. When you stumble on a quote that hits, save it. Don't ask, where does this go? Will I ever use this again? What's the right tag? That friction, that pause is where most ideas die. Your job is not to become a librarian. Your job is to become a field researcher of your own life. Loop note, the dinner napkin drawer. For months, I had a drawer in our kitchen that slowly filled with scribbled napkins, post-it notes, and folded receipts. Things I jotted down while talking with Heather or Alistair during dinner. It felt like clutter, junk, nothing usable. But then I noticed something strange. I kept pulling out the same 3 notes. One became a podcast intro, one made its way into a keynote, another sparked a workflow I still use today. That drawer didn't look like a system, but it worked like one. It wasn't organized, it was lived in, and that made all the difference. Structure that emerges. Here's what happens when you commit to capturing first. 1. Patterns emerge. 2. Certain tags repeat naturally. 3. You hear yourself asking the same questions. 4. Some voice notes get replayed again and again. That's your system trying to show itself. It's not lazy to wait, it's adaptive. Structure from use is how trails form through forests, not from a master plan, but from footsteps. What to save versus what to search. Not everything needs to be perfectly filed. Not every note needs a home. We live in a world of powerful search. Search is your safety net. Capture is your superpower. Let's say you record a thought but forget to tag it. Later, AI can surface it anyway. Because of phrasing, emotional tone, or voice frequency, that's not failure. That's future-proofing. Your Organize Later starter kit. You don't need more willpower. You need less friction. Here's how to begin. Choose one inbox. Whether it's a Notion page, an Obsidian Vault, or your voice memo app, just funnel everything there. Label loosely. Forget perfect tags. Try tagging for emotion or context instead. Idea, stuck, insight, dream. Set a weekly scan loop. Block 20 minutes to review your inbox and ask, what showed up more than once? What patterns are forming? What's worth building on? This isn't tidy, it's true. A word on perfectionism. People who struggle with disorganization usually aren't messy. They're scared of missing something, scared of looking unprofessional, scared they're doing it wrong. But Digital Kaizen isn't about impressing anyone. It's about trusting the process, especially the messy parts. Every insight starts disorganized. Clarity comes from contact, not control. Final thought. Structure is a byproduct, not a prerequisite. If you organize too early, you're building a system for a version of yourself that doesn't exist yet. If you capture now and wait just a little, you'll end up with something more durable, a system shaped by reality, one that fits your brain, your voice, and your actual life. That's the Kaizen way. Capture freely, organize lightly, trust the loop. Chapter 10. Surfacing what matters. Tagging, highlighting, and the art of letting AI help. Capturing is where your system begins, but surfacing, that's where insight lives. It's the shift from I have data to I see something, from random memos to recurring themes, from noise to signal. You already have more information than you can process. The real question isn't, did I save it? It's, can I see what it's trying to tell me? That's what this chapter is about, and how to surface what matters lightly, meaningfully, and with the help of AI. Don't let your data become a graveyard. We're often taught to capture everything: voice memos, transcripts, meeting notes. But then what? If you don't build a habit of surfacing meaning, your archive becomes a black hole. You'll have everything, but you'll see nothing. This doesn't require more tagging. It requires a better relationship with what you've already saved. The problem with over-tagging. Let's not pretend otherwise. Tagging can feel productive. 47 categories, 19 labels, every file color-coded and alphabetized. But here's what usually happens. You never look at it again. The system becomes a second job, a burden, not a partner. In Digital Kaizen, we don't tag for control. We tag for reflection, not to sort perfectly, but to flag what keeps showing up emotionally, strategically, or thematically. Tag lightly like a guide. Use tags the way a trail guide uses markers, just enough to help your future self find the good stuff. Ask, what emotion is here? What pattern feels familiar? What thought feels unfinished? A few powerful tags: pattern or insight, gut check, unresolved, energy spike. Forget categories. You're not building a database. You're building a conversation with your own experience. Highlighting. The fastest way to say this mattered. If tagging feels like too much, just highlight. One click, one swipe, one signal to your future self. Hey, this moment mattered. In descriptfireflies.ai or any transcript-enabled tool, highlight when your tone shifted. The client said something emotionally charged. You surprised yourself with clarity or hesitation. It's fast, it's frictionless, and it works. Let AI help surface what you missed. Here's where things get powerful. AI isn't just for transcription anymore. It's your second brain for seeing what you didn't catch in the moment. You can now ask tools like ChatGPT, Fireflies.ai, or Notion AI. What themes did I repeat this week? What emotions showed up in my tone? What phrases sound like hooks or recurring pain points? This isn't outsourcing your thinking, it's extending your pattern recognition. A real example, the phrase I almost missed. A few months back, I had a week full of client meetings. Nothing felt unusual, nothing stood out. But later, when I ran a Fireflies.ai analysis and asked it to extract emotional phrases, I saw something. 3 different clients said almost the exact same thing. I just feel like I'm missing something. That floored me. In the moment, I'd been focused on numbers, action steps, next moves. But that phrase, that was the real data. It told me something deeper was going on, something about fear, clarity, and self-trust. That one phrase became a flag. I tagged it. I built a new discovery question around it. And now, I listen for it like a hawk. That's what surfacing does. It brings the real story to the surface before it slips away. The surfacing loop, your weekly ritual. Try this once a week. It takes 20 minutes. 1. Pull your voice notes, transcripts, or highlights. 2. Ask your AI assistant, what patterns do you see? What ideas or emotions repeat? What surprised you? 3. Highlight what stings, sings, or feels unresolved. 4. Tag only what you want to see again. 5. Ask, what's unfinished here? What's trying to get my attention? What needs to be explored further? Take one action, even a tiny one. Send a message, write a bullet, schedule a convo. That's it. You don't need more tech. You need more notice what you already have. Why this works and always has. The production effect. Emotionally tagged or verbalized data is more memorable. Spaced retrieval, waiting before reflecting, increases insight and retention. Fog behavior model. Simplicity increases follow-through. Light tagging and highlighting are more sustainable than complex systems. When you let emotion plus repetition plus reflection do the heavy lifting, you turn your data into direction. Final thought, surfacing is the soul of the system. Capturing is your foundation, but surfacing is where you meet yourself. You don't need to predict what will matter. You need to keep listening for what's trying to speak again. When you do that, You start to see the story behind the stats. You build a loop of reflection that compounds. You make better decisions, not by trying harder, but by noticing sooner. That's the heartbeat of Digital Kaizen, not just saving more, but seeing more. Chapter 12, Reflecting and Looping, weekly reviews that teach you who you're becoming, a system that meets you where you are and helps you go further. Let's start with a truth that most systems skip. Reflection isn't a luxury, it's an upgrade. In Digital Kaizen, the loop is more than a metaphor, it's the heartbeat of your system. And the weekly review is how you listen to that heartbeat. This chapter is about building that rhythm into your life, not perfectly, not rigidly, but consistently. Because if capture is the raw material and AI-assisted surfacing is your co-editor, then weekly review is where the raw data gets metabolized into wisdom. Why weekly? I'll be straight with you. Most people avoid reflection because it feels like homework. But here's the reframe. The weekly review isn't about doing more, it's about seeing better. We live life forward, but we make sense of it looking backward. A weekly review gives you patterns you missed in the moment, wins you forgot to celebrate, threads that need closure, nudges that gently realign your course. A well-run review can turn a scattered week into a signal-rich experience. What a Digital Kaizen weekly review looks like. Forget the corporate checklist with 37 bullet points. This isn't about compliance, it's a clarity ritual. Step 1, set the space. Create a moment for stillness. Sunday afternoon, Friday at closing time, Monday morning. The win matters less than the consistency. Step 2, pull in the raw material. Gather your style, voice memos, fireflies.ai or Descript summaries, calendar entries, and AI-captured notes. Idea inbox. You want the week in your words, not someone else's template. Let AI assist. Ask fireflies.ai or Notion AI, what insights stood out this week? Ask ChatGPT, what emotions or themes repeated? Ask your GPTs, what showed up more than once? Let the machine surface the patterns, you handle the meaning. Step 3, highlight what mattered. Look for 3 things. Emotional spikes, what made you light up or shut down? Recurring phrases, especially if said aloud more than once. Unfinished loops, threads still tugging at your attention. Tag them, star them, or just circle them in your mind. This is noticing, not organizing. Step 4, ask the right questions. Don't stop at what did I do? Ask, what did I feel the most this week? What conversation or phrase stuck with me? Where did my energy spike or drop? What insight am I resisting? What loop am I avoiding? These are the questions that teach the system about you. Step 5, close the loop lightly. You don't need to fix everything. Just take one small action. Send a follow-up note, relabel a project, reschedule a task, capture a fresh insight. This is where reflection turns into momentum. This is less about the week and more about you. A review isn't about your calendars, it's about your character arc. It helps you track who you've been, who you are right now, who you're quietly becoming. Reflection builds continuity, a narrative you can grow from. And with AI servicing the right cues, that growth gets easier, faster, and deeper. Real-world use cases. Here's how I used my weekly loop recently. I asked GPT to analyze fireflies.ai notes and noticed the phrase behind on strategy across several client conversations. That led me to change how I prep for reviews. I revisited a voice note where I sounded flat and emotionally drained. That prompted me to protect more white space on Fridays. I used a script to pull old podcast highlights and discovered a single sentence that became the missing line for a marketing campaign. The loop didn't just show me the past, it shaped my next move. Loop note, the voice memo I didn't want to hear. One Friday, I sat down to do my weekly review and almost skipped the voice notes. I was tired. The week felt fine, nothing dramatic. But I opened the memo anyway, one I had recorded midweek while driving. And I'll be honest, I didn't like what I heard. My tone was flat. I sounded more like someone managing a to-do list than someone building a vision. There was no spark, no conviction. I was going through the motions. That moment hit me harder than any to-do list ever could. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't a big crisis. It was just a subtle signal that I was drifting. That's the kind of data your brain won't give you, but your loop will. That voice memo changed how I approached the next week. I scheduled more white space. I had a deeper check in with my assistant. I asked better questions in client meetings, and none of that would have happened if I hadn't hit play on a 90-second clip. When life gets messy, adjust the loop. Some weeks you won't do the review, yet you'll miss it. Travel will disrupt you. Life will get loud. That's okay. That's expected. That's human. Kaizen doesn't demand perfection. It invites return. Don't rebuild the ritual from scratch. Just re-enter with a 2-minute reflection. One insight, one pause, one breath. The loop doesn't need you to be flawless. It just needs you to come back. Common mistakes and how to avoid them. Trying to review everything. Just surface the moments that moved you, not a full audit. Turning it into a to-do list. Your task manager handles projects. This is for patterns. Being too hard on yourself. Curiosity fuels growth. Judgment shuts it down. The Digital Kaizen Weekly Review Summary Checklist. To create space. Pull raw data, voice, notes, AI. Highlight emotional, repeated, or unfinished signals. Ask reflective, pattern-seeking questions. Choose one small next action. Return next week. That's it. That's the loop. Final thought. You're already building wisdom. Every loop is a rep. Each one builds your self-awareness, your system, your momentum. This isn't a ritual for productivity. It's a rhythm for becoming. The weekly review isn't where the week ends. It's where your next level begins. Chapter 14. Building feedback into the system. How reflection becomes evolution in Digital Kaizen. Most systems are built to run. Few are built to listen. That's the fatal flaw in most productivity frameworks. They're optimized for doing, but not for learning, for execution, but not evolution. They treat your life like a project to manage instead of a process to grow. Digital Kaizen flips that script. The system isn't just about capturing or organizing. It's about transforming raw experience into refined direction. And the way that happens, the engine behind it all, is feedback, but not the kind that's performance-based, not judgment, not self-scolding, and definitely not micromanagement in disguise. We're talking about something gentler, smarter, built-in. We're talking about feedback that fuels growth without burnout, that makes your system self-aware, that helps you see what's really working before it breaks. And to do that, you need to make feedback part of the architecture, not an afterthought, not a feature, a principle. The loop that listens. In Digital Kaizen, feedback is embedded in the loop itself. You capture something, a voice note, an insight, a frustration. You revisit it later through AI summaries, highlights, or just your own reflection. You notice a pattern, something that's not working or working better than expected. You adjust your schedule, your systems, your habits. You repeat and let the new data guide the next round. This isn't productivity for productivity's sake. It's clarity by design. Why feedback fails in other systems. This isn't easy to say, but most feedback loops fall apart because they rely too heavily on memory or motivation. We assume we'll remember the lesson. We promise we'll do it better next time. We jot down a quick note and never return to it. But the modern brain is overwhelmed, and feedback without a system is just noise. That's why the key is embedding the loop into your flow, not hoping you'll remember later. Loop note. When the loop called me out. A few months back, I kept hitting a wall with my Friday reviews. I had everything set up, fireflies.ai summaries, calendar entries, even a custom GPTs trained to nudge me with themes. But I wasn't doing the loop. I told myself I was too busy, that I'd catch up later. When you boil it down, I was avoiding something. One Sunday, I finally sat down, half out of guilt, half out of curiosity. I ran my AI review and this question popped up from my prompts. Where did I avoid something I should have faced? Immediately I knew there was a client conversation I'd been dreading, a strategic decision I was postponing, and a part of me that felt out of alignment, but I hadn't slowed down enough to hear it. That question, paired with the pattern in my own voice note, snapped me out of avoidance mode. I didn't need to overhaul my system. I just needed to listen to what it was already telling me. That's when I realized feedback doesn't yell, it whispers, but only if you make space for it. 4 layers of feedback in Digital Kaizen. To build real feedback into your system, you need to design it across multiple layers. 1. Emotional feedback. Your voice tells the truth. You can't optimize what you won't acknowledge. Voice-first thinking gives you access to emotional signals that typing can't catch: the tone of your voice, the pauses, the sigh before the insight. When you listen back to your week, you'll often hear what your logical mind tried to skip over. Why did I sound so drained after that meeting? Why did I light up when I mentioned that project? What am I pretending not to know? This kind of emotional feedback is subtle but potent. It builds self-awareness that no productivity app can track. 2. AI feedback, reflective technology. This is where tools like Fireflies.ai, ChatGPT, and Notion AI come in. When used intentionally, they become mirrors, helping you surface themes, summarize patterns, and even ask better questions. You might prompt, "What themes did I talk about most this week? What tone showed up most often in my voice notes? Summarize the energy of my last 5 meetings." AI doesn't replace your insight, it sharpens it. It surfaces what's hiding under the surface. And because it's fast, repeatable, and unemotional, it helps you move from gut feeling to grounded observation. 3. System feedback, frictions and failures. Every breakdown is feedback. If a tool constantly gets skipped, if your review never happens on Friday, if your calendar feels like a trap instead of a compass, that's not a failure, it's a message. Digital Kaizen doesn't shame you for the gaps, it listens to them. You might ask, what's getting skipped every week? Where am I consistently overcommitted? What do I keep trying to force? These moments are gold. They're invitations to simplify, restructure, or let go. 4. Human feedback. Trusted eyes on your patterns. Sometimes you need someone else to reflect what you can't see. That could be a team member who notices how you show up in meetings, a coach or therapist who holds up a mirror, even your AI assistant, trained with enough context to know your baseline and detect changes. The principle is the same. You grow faster when you stop going it alone. In Digital Kaizen, thinking with others from the extended mind includes building feedback through conversation, formal or not. Make feedback a ritual, not a reaction. To keep feedback useful, you can't treat it like fire drills. It can't just show up in crisis mode when something breaks. It has to be steady, predictable, inviting. Here's how to build that. Weekly feedback prompts. Try these every Sunday. What felt easy this week? What felt heavy? Where did I avoid something I should have faced? What patterns am I seeing in my voice notes or AI summaries? What system friction showed up again? What insight surprised me most? Use these inside your weekly review. Speak them aloud. Let your system answer back. Feedback dashboards, lightweight and visual. You don't need a complicated dashboard, but you might track energy by day, voice tone or mood tag, key insights surfaced by AI, friction points by task or tool, win of the week from client, personal, or internal data. Even one post-it note labeled, "Don't do this again next week," can serve as a powerful feedback loop. Feedback is not criticism. This can't be overstated. We've been trained to hear feedback as what I did wrong. In Digital Kaizen, feedback is redefined as what the system is trying to tell me. Sometimes that's, "You're doing better than you think." Other times, "This piece doesn't belong anymore." The mindset shift is critical. Feedback is fuel, not failure. Why it matters more than ever. In an AI-accelerated world, data is everywhere. The danger? We drown in it. Feedback, when built into the system, becomes your flotation device. It's what pulls clarity from the chaos. It's what turns noise into knowledge. It's what turns busy into becoming. Final thought: the system that listens, learns. You're not just building a system that captures. You're building one that converses, that responds, that evolves. And when that happens, when you become the kind of person who reviews gently, tweaks often, and notices sooner, everything changes. The best systems don't just run, they reflect, they grow. They help you become who you're trying to be, one honest insight at a time. That's what feedback is for. That's what makes Digital Kaizen sustainable. And that's why this chapter isn't optional, it's foundational. That brings us to the end of part 2. If this section felt more experiential than instructional, that was intentional. Digital Kaizen isn't something that you install, it's something you return to. In this part, you didn't just learn what the system is, you felt how it works. Capture, surface, reflect, and adjust. Over time, those small loops begin to teach you something deeper, not just about your work, but about yourself. Who are you when things are calm? Who are you when things get heavy? And what keeps asking for your attention? In the next part, we'll zoom out even further. We'll talk about how this loop shapes identity, decision-making, and long-term direction, not through force, but through consistency. When you're ready, continue on to part 3.